Hi, welcome to episode 286 of your favorite daily podcast, A Couple of Things, a podcast about things. Today, I'm going to talk about baking, and more specifically, some interesting things I've realized since I started baking. Let's get into it. So, my baking craze didn't start during COVID, which is when everybody got the baking bug. Mine started about 2 years ago, and it all started with banana bread, like during COVID. So, I had some leftover bananas that were going bad, and I was like, oh, I should bake banana bread. And this was for some weird reason when there was a flour shortage in Europe. I don't remember why there was a flour shortage, but there was a flour shortage, and I had to hunt down. I had to walk up and down the whole of Berlin to find flour. Of course, I'm exaggerating, but it took a very, very long time. And instead of me to buy the flour first, knowing that there was a flour shortage, I bought everything else first before buying flour. But eventually, I shall find flour. Anyway, and since then, I've been baking pretty much a lot since then. Not so much in the past year, but a lot generally. And every opportunity I have, I try to bake something. Anyway, and there's a thing that I've noticed so far. There are many things I've noticed so far. Firstly, Americans eat a lot of sugar. Every time I find a baking recipe from an American site, I always have to like half or like use 2/3 of the amount of sugar. And sometimes it's still too sweet. So I don't know what's in the sugar there or what's in the sugar here, but if you're baking or you want to start baking, if you're using American recipes, do not use the amount of sugar that they have in there in the recipe. Always reduce it by half or a third. But for real, whenever I tell people I'm baking, they're always like, oh, what recipes do you like to use? Or and blah blah blah. And I often say that I never use one recipe because I bake something and everybody's like, oh, share your recipe. I really like this thing. And I was like, well, it's kind of a mix of multiple different recipes. It's not just one recipe that I'm using. And everybody is like aghast when I say that. Because apparently baking is a precise science and you have to measure everything to perfect accuracy. Otherwise, your recipe will fail and you will be left with something that is not whatever you wanted to bake initially, which, to be fair, is true to a large extent. But so far, I haven't had any great, terrible baking mishaps, except when there was one time where it was really bad. I was trying to make a coconut cookie thing using like all these gluten-free, dairy-free recipes, and just let's leave it as it was a disaster. Because I didn't follow everything accurately like I always do. But anyway, my point is that a lot of times people will tell you that you have to do something a certain way, that there's one right way to do something, or this is you have to follow this step by step procedure and order and do this thing and that thing, which again in some contexts it is true most of the time, and in some contexts most of the time there's one best way to do something, or if you do something in a different way it could cause trouble and so on. But what I've learned from this, one of the things I've learned from baking is this is not always true. You are free to experiment with things and break the rules, so to say, and not measure everything to 0.00001 accuracy, right? Like I rarely ever use just one recipe in my baking. I will look for like 4 recipes and then pick things from each of them that I like and combine everything together and make something. And most of the time it turns out okay. I've only had one disaster, like I said. And the other times where it's not like the best, it's usually salvageable. There's always like it can be saved. And the point, and I think also in breaking the rules, I don't just break the rules haphazardly. I Google stuff. So I might say a recipe that says, oh, use yogurt. And then I don't have yogurt at home. I don't want to go and buy yogurt. So I'll Google it. What can I use instead of yogurt? And then I read why yogurt. And then I realize that, oh, I can also use kefir because the reason I'm using yogurt, kefir also has those qualities. Or sour cream, because depending on why I'm using yogurt, I could also use sour cream instead. Or even buttermilk, depending on what it is I'm baking. So as I started baking more and actually reading recipes, I don't just skip to the end where they have the recipe card. I actually read for each ingredient, why is this ingredient in this recipe, so I know why I can switch it out and what I can switch it out with. Because for example, sometimes I'll see butter in a recipe and I don't want to use butter, I don't have butter at home and I have olive oil, then I use olive oil instead, because I can replace olive oil or some other kind of oil with butter depending on what I'm trying to make. If I'm trying to make a cookie, I can't replace olive oil with butter, but if I'm trying to bake a cake, I can. So yeah, it's just like you can quote unquote break the rules, but you need to understand why the rules are there and what they're for, so you can break it in a way that makes sense and doesn't result in disaster for you. um that is one thing. Or second thing, the first thing was that you can actually, like, you don't have to follow the recipe to the T. You can change things in the recipe. And again, this is a metaphorical, I guess is the word, example. So to say, just like generally in life, people often tell you that, oh, this is the way to do this thing and you should do this way, blah blah. But it's just the way that somebody or a lot of people have tried over time and has worked, which again, there's value in that, but there could also be a different way, a different thing that you could do that will work for you. So yeah, I think I started by saying that things that I've learned for baking, but I guess this is basically just it, is that there's flexibility in everything, even things that seem rigid and impossible to shift. I still need questions. I still need suggestions of who to talk to. I still need people who want to come on to talk about something to fill the form. So please do that. Thank you very much. And yeah, do like, share, subscribe if you found it interesting, insightful, and all the nice things. Bye.